Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Start with the Labour Party, who, let's be honest, will be keen to put 2016 behind them. Failed leadership challenges, votes of no confidence and the worst opinion polls the party has suffered in opposition since modern polling began. Well, last year, the Deputy Leader, Tom Watson, tried to broker a deal that would lead to Jeremy Corbyn stepping down. But when I went to meet him in his West Bromwich East constituency, he struck a rather different tone.
The Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Shadow Culture Secretary, and apart from Jeremy Corbyn, the man with the biggest mandate from Labour members. Tom Watson took me to his favourite West Bromwich cafe, where he goes for breakfast before constituency surgeries. He's under no illusions 2017 could be a difficult year.
There's a golden rule in politics that no matter how bad it gets, do not be under an illusion that it can't get any worse. But also, there's also a golden rule for politicians, which is if you make predictions, they're always wrong. Who would have said at the start of 2016 that David Cameron would have to stand down as Prime Minister, that Britain would be leaving the European Union and that Theresa May would be Prime Minister? Dare I say that Jeremy Corbyn would also be facing a second leadership election. So we face uncertain times, and I think what that requires is political parties to show strong leadership, to give direction to the country and be very honest about the problems they face as a political group to try and deal with some of the terrible global problems that are facing the British people.
It's a challenging period, though, for Labour. We were talking about strong leadership. Len McCluskey has given Jeremy Corbyn until 2019 to start improving things in the polls. Diane Abbott has given him until next year. What's your timetable? I
think it's absolutely wrong to try and put a timetable on Jeremy's leadership, particularly as he's now got a second mandate from the leaders. I'm very clear. I gave private counsel when Jeremy was challenged in a no-confidence vote. I thought it would be very difficult for him to lead our parliamentary party after that vote took place. But he thought different. He went to the membership, they gave him a second mandate. It's now for all MPs to respect that mandate. He will lead us into the general election. It will be his manifesto. And whether you're Len McCluskey or Diane Abbott, they should respect that and make sure that he leads the party unencumbered by those kind of false tests.
So it sounds like you were pretty clear that Jeremy Corbyn will lead the party into the 2020 general election.
I'm very clear about it.
There was an interesting report out recently from the Fabian Society that's saying that Labour is on course to win fewer than 200 seats, the worst performance since the 1930s. I mean, is it time now to consider doing a deal with some other left-wing parties?
I think that is a counsel of despair if you do that. I mean, effectively, what you're saying if you go down that route is saying we accept that the policies we've got are not acceptable to the electorate, and so we're trying to build a wider coalition. It's not ambitious enough, and it never works. What we've actually got to do is make sure that we have an exciting manifesto, that we try and capture the future, we try and capture people's imagination about what Britain could be like post-Brexit, how we can make our country fair again and make sure that it's not just the sort of limited few that benefit from economic growth. And that requires a strong Labour Party. So I don't buy into this strategy at all that you do a deal with the SNP and the Greens.
And do you think those conversations are going on then?
Look, they go on all the time. Actually, they went on with Tony Blair, they went on with Gordon Brown, and on the left of the Labour Party, that debate is taking place. I'm not going to have anything to do with that. I just think it's a ridiculous notion.
The polls, of course, are pretty problematic for Labour. Some of them have you as many as 14 points behind the Conservatives. Now is the time for you all to be in the trenches together. When was the last time you spoke to Jeremy Corbyn?
By text yesterday. We talked about the death of the art critic John Berger, and then just before Christmas I wished him happy Christmas, and he texted me to wish me happy New Year. So we've had the Christmas break. We actually talk on the phone and text nearly every day, and I see him at the Shadow Cabinet on a Tuesday, and I see him at PMQs on a Wednesday.
So you do feel listened to, because that wasn't really the case. Many Shadow Cabinet members previously said that they didn't feel that they were being listened to by the leader's office.
Well, I guess I'm in a unique position that when I think my voice should be heard, I've got ways of getting it out there. You know, there were teething problems with the way Jeremy's team work, and I don't have a great relationship with some of his team members, that's publicly on record. But with Jeremy himself, we enjoy a very strong relationship. And one of my responsibilities, I think, is to represent the tradition in the Labour Party that it is not his natural tradition, to make sure that their voices are heard in this debate, and I'll be doing that in 2017.
I wonder as well if there's some wider issues with Labour that aren't to do with Jeremy Corbyn, because sometimes I think it's quite easy to blame Jeremy Corbyn for some of the issues, but actually if you look at the centrist MPs, there's been a bit of a vacuum of ideas, hasn't there? What's the big vision? No wonder people are more excited by what Jeremy Corbyn's offering.
Actually, I think in the latter years of Labour in government, you know, politicians always say, how do you renew? How do you renew in government? And we found that very difficult. And what I realised was what it actually usually means is the politicians are usually so exhausted after being in government for so long. They've not read enough, they've not engaged enough, they've not listened to their voters enough. And actually, we've now had 6 years to do that. And what I see in the Parliamentary Labour Party is a cauldron of ideas. You know, you look at some of the new people that came in 2015, Steve Reed, who's got an organisation called Labour Together, which is looking at what the centre-left in politics has to do to win again. Or you look at Rachel Reeves, who is carrying on the mantle that Joe Cox left to. She's about to launch a loneliness commission. You know, there are 1.5 million people in this country who are over 70 and say that they either live in total loneliness or mainly in loneliness.
See, all this sounds very good, but it's quite small, isn't it? When you consider the existential crisis that Labour is in now, which has nothing to do with the leadership, it's because voters in places like West Bromwich want very different things to voters in Islington. What's the solution to that? Is the broad church of Labour over?
Well, look, a political party is the sum of the parts, right? And what I see in my parliamentary party are very talented people sparking new ideas all the time. Now, obviously, it's for the leadership team to sort of condense that into messages that can be used on the doorstep. And to me, it's about how do we make sure that people are economically secure, have jobs that give them a future and are reliable, can afford to live in their own homes or rent their own homes, and their kids can have a brighter future. And there are too many people in West Bromwich and in Islington actually who can no longer get on the housing ladder because they're priced out of owning their own home, can't lay roots in a community, feel that they're maybe qualified in low-paid jobs, don't know how many hours they're going to work the following week because they're on 0-hours contracts, and don't have any permanence in trying to sort of build their families and live their lives. And it's for all of us to address that. That's a challenge that Theresa May has got and Jeremy Corbyn has got. And I think the political party that can find remedies to those sort of problems are the ones that are going to be successful at the next election.
Immigration, of course, is one of the big fault lines, dividing the country, also dividing Labour supporters and voters. What is your party's policy on immigration? Because I'll be honest, I'm not actually clear. Members of the Shadow Cabinet seem to be saying quite different things.
But I think you've got a fair point on that, and it centres around this debate around free movement of labour, which is one of the treaties we're signed up to currently in the EU. And in my view, if you talk to people in West Bromwich High Street, they will tell you that is the reason they voted to leave the European Union in very large numbers in this area. And I think for the Labour Party, you know, what we can't say is the status quo.
So what's the policy then?
Well, so for me, what we've got to, what part of the settlement that comes out of Brexit is we've got to...
Not just for you, I'm just trying to get to grips with what is Labour's policy on immigration.
Well, Labour is looking at, we don't know what is going to come out of the Brexit settlement, but the key issue on free movement of Labour...
We don't really know what the policy is on immigration at the moment.
Well, we don't know what the government position is, do we? Because the government...
She said that immigration's a red line, to be fair, Theresa May.
Well, yes, so we know that we're going to come out of the Free Movement of Labour Treaty, and that will form the basis of our negotiations on Brexit. But what the future looks like after that, Theresa May won't be able to tell you. Now, I wanted to be able to say that this country will have control over its own borders, that we'll be able to count the number of people in and count the number of people out, and make sure that people, a convincing, fair solution to people's genuine concerns about immigration is addressed. And that is one of the challenges that Labour will have in its manifesto whenever that election comes. And if we don't address that issue, then Labour won't win that election. I'm very clear about that. But let's let Theresa May tell us what's going to come after Brexit so that we can try and work out what the future holds.
So I'm clear on what your view is on immigration, still not clear on the party's position.
Look, that's the party position. Let's be clear. You know, we want a fair immigration system. It's unfair of you to ask me what Labour's notional position is when we don't even know what Theresa May's negotiating position is. That's on free movement. You know, no, the future is very uncertain, as we said at the start of the interview. Let's see what Theresa May comes up with.
Talking about Theresa May, what do you make of her Brexit negotiation strategy so far?
Well, firstly, I had a degree of sympathy with her when that civil servant resigned this week. I thought a civil servant that writes his own policy manifesto went on his resignation letter clearly wasn't acting as a proper civil servant. But what he did highlight was the fact that they really don't have a negotiating plan. And it seems to me that we're going back on Brexit, that we're creating more uncertainty for businesses, more uncertainty for workers, and unless she rapidly reassures the country that she actually knows what she's doing in this area, then I think we're in for a very difficult 2017.
Do you think she does know what she's doing?
I think she's troubled. I don't think she actually knows what a negotiation plan is. I think she has difficulty recognising the differences between Boris Johnson, David Davis and Liam Fox. And until she can solve their internal disputes, she's never going to be able to convince the country she's got a plan. And that is very, very bad for the future of jobs in this country.
Just want to bring you pictures of the Prime Minister, Theresa May, arriving here at Sky Central, ready for her interview on Sophy Ridge on Sunday in just a short while. She, of course, will be keen to talk about the shared society, her vision for Britain, but also will be trying to see if she will shed any light on her Brexit plans as well. Theresa May there arriving in the building. Well, now we're joined by Anushka Asana, the political editor of The Guardian, Tim Shipman, who is also political editor, this time of the Sunday Times, and Luke Johnson, businessman and a Brexit supporter. Well, in a moment, we'll be discussing the big newspaper stories of the day. But first, I was quite keen to get your thoughts on the Tom Watson interview. Anushka, what did you make of it?
Well, it was very revealing that the issue on which you really pushed hard on immigration, he says it's not fair to say we should have a policy on immigration at the moment, and that's clearly going to build into a bit of an issue for the Labour Party this year. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn will talk a lot about clamping down on the exploitation of workers, but a lot of their voters want to hear more about free movement.
It's that division between Labour supporters in different parts of the country almost, isn't it?
Well, one of the most telling stats out of the referendum was that of the 25 most Brexit seats in the country, 20 of those are Labour, and of the 25 most Remain seats in the country, 20 of those are Labour. And Jeremy Corbyn's got to square this circle, and it's really difficult to keep voters in the north on side with the guys he hangs out with in North London.
And Luke Johnson, Tom Watson, they're also quite clear. He thinks that Jeremy Corbyn will be leading the party into the next election. Do you think that's a good move for the party?
I think it's a good move for the country because I think it's pretty certain Labour won't get into power, and I think that's good news.
And what do you think of what Tom Watson had to say on immigration and Brexit as well?
Well, as my colleagues here say, I think they're deeply confused and at odds with their own core supporters, so they have an existential problem.
Well, this brings us all quite nicely to the first story that we were going to discuss in the newspapers. This one's been chosen by you, Tim Shipman. And it's in The Observer, page 8 and 9, saying that senior MPs are urging Jeremy Corbyn to back controls on movement. So, in effect, people in the Labour Party saying he needs to have a policy on immigration. It's
the same issue, and these are, bright MPs, Stephen Kinnock, Emma Reynolds. Corbyn guys will say these are, this is the Blairite tendency, but they're saying, we've got to readdress this. And Corbyn's position is that, he wants the doors thrown totally open, no limits on immigration, and yet he's got a party that doesn't. And, Blairite people who spent their time supporting a former Prime Minister who said, let's have everybody in from Eastern Europe, let's not have any controls. I think a lot of people from that wing of the party now recognise that that was a mistake and that that's cost them votes. And they're saying we've got to have a two-tier system, bring in the high-skilled people in limitless numbers, but, we need quotas and limits on the number of unskilled migrants. And that's a big debate for the Labour Party, and, they're putting that out there today.
Anushka Asana, do you think that Jeremy Corbyn will listen to this call?
Well, I interviewed Jeremy Corbyn over Christmas, and it's quite interesting. The moment he got really passionate, when his eyes lit up, was when he was making the positive case for immigration, saying, hang on, go into a hospital and look at who treats you, have a look who's doing these skilled jobs in technology. Clearly, he is very uncomfortable with the idea of talking about free movement. I mean, I pushed him on that issue, and the thing that he really thinks is that economic access has to be the priority, and that it'll be very difficult to do anything on immigration if we do that That said, the people around Jeremy Corbyn know that he's got a bit of an issue here, and that's why they'll be pushing him to say more and more on those other ways that they believe you can reduce numbers.
Luke Johnson, as someone who supported leaving the EU, I'm interested to know your thoughts on how much immigration played a factor, do you think, in the referendum result?
I don't know, because I don't know the minds of all those voters who voted to leave the EU. I know that actually I support immigration, but I also support a degree of border controls which we don't have with EU citizens at the moment. So I don't think the current system works, and I think that is part of the reason we voted to leave the EU. And it's clearly a very big problem for the Labour Party, but I think it's a challenge for the country as a whole to balance the economic benefits of immigration and other benefits, culture and so forth, together with issues like pressure on infrastructure and so forth, which I guess is why people are opposed to immigration.
And from a business perspective as well, I suppose, being able to hire the best people and make sure that you
it's
get the
vital.
work.
We need talent in this country, be it in the NHS or in business, or indeed in restaurants. And it's not as simple as saying only highly skilled immigrants, please, because actually in my sector's hospitality, we have hundreds of thousands of what are notionally called unskilled, i.e. not highly qualified with degrees, immigrants who are contributing a great deal. And I fear, unfortunately, that they're not going to suddenly be replaced by keen and hard-working British staff. So it's not going to be simple. This is, you know, a difficult challenge we face.
Anishka, how do you think articles like this will go down with the momentum faction of the Labour Party?
Well, clearly it shows that there is still division. Things are calmer in the Labour Party, but I think this is going to be the key to kind of divides when they emerge, because it's very uncomfortable for people. You know, think about Diane Abbott, the Shadow Home Secretary. She wants to talk again and again about the virtues of immigration, and she says Labour won't win by becoming UKIP light. On the other hand, these MPs are saying, one sec, we are going to lose votes across our heartlands if we don't do something about this. And as Luke's saying, everyone's sort of grappling to try and understand what did the Brexit vote mean. I think a lot of people in Labour think it meant we need to do something about immigration, and they fear for the future of the party. But Jeremy Corbyn won that leadership contest and won it even better than the first time around. So clearly he feels he wants to make his argument.
Let's talk now about the next story that we've selected, which is the Mail on Sunday. Luke Johnson, you picked this one, didn't you? And it is a big story at the moment, isn't it, with what's happening with the NHS. This is the front page of the Mail on Sunday saying that the NHS is under pressure. How bad do you think things are?
Well, they're probably very bad if you're at the coalface. My wife works in the NHS and it's not easy. But this is not a new problem. This is a perpetual problem, because everywhere across the world, societies are ageing and people's expectations of healthcare are rising dramatically. And therefore, we need to have, perhaps as we are now having in this country, a more honest and realistic debate about immigration, a more honest and realistic debate about what we can afford and what we should expect from a free at the point of delivery health system. Nowhere else in the world has a system quite like the NHS, and I'm not saying it isn't a great part of this society, but at the same time, it is unsustainable. And the idea that we can spend limitless amounts on healthcare forever is not realistic. So I think more honesty from politicians, more honesty from the media about what is realistic would be a good idea, because I think it would tell people that there isn't limitless resources in terms of people and money to care for our society.
Is there an argument that the debate that we have about the NHS is just too emotional in this country? I mean, the way Labour, for example, they're obviously so committed to the NHS and think it is such a fantastic thing that sometimes any criticism of it is seen as a demand to try and completely get rid of it.
Well, it's certainly true that things are rationed, and that is a really difficult thing for people to come to terms with, because when it's your own health, you just want things to be absolutely perfect for you. That said, clearly there is something going on at the moment that is really worrying, and you know, people dying on hospital trolleys is something that's going to really concern people across the country, and for the Conservative government, they're going to have to try and come up with an answer to this.
Or maybe it's something we can put to Theresa May later on.